This week on Jerusalem Dateline, after 2 years, Pastor Andrew Brunson is a free man answering the prayers of millions. And Israel's good friend Nikki Haley resigns from the UN. Who can fill her shoes? Plus, an uproar over a missing Saudi journalist. Is he dead or alive? And how will his fate affect the Middle East? All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. After more than 2 years in prison and detention, American-born pastor Andrew Brunson was finally set free after his fourth appearance before a Turkish court. Here's more on that story. Pastor Brunson's ordeal has mobilized Christians around the world.
Hundreds of thousands of people have been praying for Pastor Brunson, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Before the court hearing, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said the release of Pastor Brunson has been a priority for the Trump administration.
Our administration has made very clear that we will continue to stand strong until Pastor Andrew Brunson is free and back home in the United States with his family and with his church.
This is historic in that how many times they have actually brought this subject up in high-level conversations with the Turkish administration.
Turkey accused Brunson of participating in a 2016 coup to overthrow the government of Turkish President Erdogan and faces up to 35 years if convicted. His latest trial took place near the city of Izmir, known as ancient Smyrna in the New Testament. Brunson ministered for more than 2 decades in his church and denied the charges. The Trump administration imposed economic sanctions against Turkey to secure his release. Middle East analyst Michael Karam said Pastor Brunson stood for more than his own freedom.
I believe this is really a call to prayer, not only for Andrew, but for the Turkish and Kurdish and Arab and Syrian and Iraqi and Iranian people, all living very much close, because it's clear that Andrew Brunson is in prison or under arrest for one reason, and that's his hope and faith in Jesus Christ as the Messiah, not only of the West, but of the entire world.
Brunson is expected to be back in the United States soon. Another major Middle East story is the mysterious disappearance and suspected murder of a U.S.-based Saudi journalist and dissident by a Saudi hit team in Turkey that threatens to damage U.S.-Saudi relations. Dale Hurd has the story.
Video shows Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi walking into the Saudi Arabian consulate in Istanbul more than a week ago. There's no video of him ever coming out. But there are images and video of an alleged 15-member Saudi assassination squad entering the country by private plane, and surveillance video that shows that 2 hours after Khashoggi walked into the consulate, a van with diplomatic license plates left with someone or something inside. News reports suggest Khashoggi, a writer for the Washington Post and a frequent critic of the Saudi government, was tortured, killed, and his body dismembered. Khashoggi had gone into the consulate to get a document to allow him to remarry while his fiancée waited outside. Saudi Arabia dismisses the allegation of murder as baseless. However, the kingdom has offered no evidence that the writer did indeed leave the consulate and is still alive.
It's a very sad situation. It's a very bad situation, and we want to get to the bottom of it.
President Trump says the U.S. is demanding answers from Saudi Arabia, and he plans to invite Khashoggi's fiancée to the White House.
His wife wrote us a letter and addressed it to my wife and myself, and we're in contact with her now, and we want to bring her to the White House.
The reaction among U.S. senators from both parties to the reports of Khashoggi's disappearance has been shock and anger. Senator Lindsey Graham says if the Saudis did murder Khashoggi, there will be, quote, hell to pay.
Well, we're going to get to the bottom of it, and I hope there's a good explanation. If not, this will be a game changer for me regarding the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
If Saudi Arabia took a U.S. resident, lured him into a consulate, and killed him, it's time for the United States to rethink our military, political, and economic relationship with Saudi Arabia.
The incident calls into question whether the heir apparent to the Saudi throne, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is the pro-democracy reformer he claimed he was. He was an open supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, but as a fierce critic of the Saudi regime, he reportedly told friends a few months ago he had reason to fear for his life. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Israelis were as shocked as Americans at the seemingly sudden resignation of U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She's one of the best friends Israel has had in a long time. Here's what some had to say. On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly last month, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told Haley she had made the UN smell better.
The hall still permeates with the stench of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic resolutions, which are the same. And I want to thank you for clearing the air.
Following the U.S. veto of a UN vote on the status of Jerusalem during Hanukkah last year, Netanyahu likened Haley to the Maccabees, who overthrew the Greek rulers in Israel after they defiled the temple.
Thank you, Ambassador Haley. On Hanukkah, you spoke like a Maccabee. You lit a candle of truth. You dispelled the darkness. One defeated the many. Truth defeated lies.
Following the announcement, Netanyahu tweeted, "I would like to thank Ambassador Nikki Haley, who led the uncompromising struggle against hypocrisy at the UN, and on behalf of the truth and justice of our country. Best of luck." Even the Mossad tweeted its goodbye with Haley's picture. "We are sad to hear Nikki Haley is resigning her post as U.S. Ambassador to the UN. Our special maritime agents will never forget that special moment you had together. Thank you, Nikki." Iran, unsurprisingly, said it was glad to see her go, with the head of Iran's press office at the UN tweeting, "New sheriff in town is no longer. We do not know who she was or what she was about, but she was a serious problem at the UN with her uninformed statements and her causing the isolation of the U.S. You need to know there is no new sheriff in town." But the head of the Israeli Jewish Congress tweeted, "Winston Churchill once said, 'You have enemies? Good. That means you've stood up for something sometime in your life.' Thank you, Nikki Haley, for always fiercely standing up for freedom, democracy, and human rights. You were a rare beacon of light, hope, and justice at the UN." Finally, the popular cartoonist Yaakov Kershin asked the question many are pondering: who can fill Nikki Haley's shoes? A Palestinian terrorist murdered a 28-year-old mother of one and 35-year-old father of three as they worked in the Barkan industrial zone near the Israeli city of Ariel in Samaria or the West Bank. The 23-year-old terrorist could be seen running away from the scene by security cameras. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the attack as severe and said the murderer would be brought to justice. The attack was particularly jarring for Israelis and Palestinians because for 35 years, the industrial zone has been a model of coexistence between the two people. More than 3,000 Palestinians work there with Israelis each day. This is the first attack ever of its kind there. Coming up, honoring diplomats who rescued Jews during the Holocaust. They're called the righteous among the nations, foreign diplomats who helped rescue hundreds of Jews from the Nazi Holocaust. CBN has partnered with the Israeli government to bring a special exhibition to Regent University. It honors those who risked their lives to save others. Gary Lane gives us a look.
Beyond Duty is a Holocaust remembrance display not only honoring Holocaust survivors, but also courageous foreign diplomats who helped rescue them. Earlier this year, the United Nations allowed the Israeli Foreign Ministry permission to display the exhibit there. And now the exhibit is on the road, with the latest stop being the CBN Regent University campus in Virginia Beach. Among some of the righteous diplomats featured in this exhibit, Raoul Wallenberg. He was from Sweden. Many of us know about him, but how many of us have ever heard about Sebastián de Romero Radigales? He was from Spain. Stories of bold diplomats from nations like Peru and Japan are also featured. Professor Gerson Moreno Riano is with Regent University.
Regent has a long history of standing with the people of Israel and the state of Israel. And the chancellor, our founder, Dr. Pat Robertson, loves the people of Israel, loves the state of Israel. So for us, this is just one more in a long series of things that we have done in partnering with the local Jewish community and the state of Israel. It highlights the importance of embodying moral courage in the face of evil. I think that today, in today's world especially, I think young people, students, others need to see and understand history.
Israel's CBN and Regent University, a unique partnership broadening Holocaust awareness by honoring 36 courageous diplomats and thousands of others, called The Righteous Among the Nations.
CBN's Gary Lane sat down with Benjamin Krasna, the deputy head of mission for the Embassy of Israel in the United States. And he asked him about the impact Haley had at the UN, the Trump administration, the peace process, and Iran.
With U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley's announced departure from the UN, the nation of Israel is losing one of its staunchest allies. Well, joining us is Benjamin Krasna. He's deputy of mission at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C. Before moving to Washington, you served as Israel's Deputy Consul General in New York. So did this surprise you about Nikki Haley?
Look, I think it took everyone by surprise yesterday because she really has been such a tremendous friend, tremendous supporter, and a great fighter for what's right. And to call out the UN on some of the absurdities that go on there in New York and in Geneva. And so we certainly will miss her, as the Prime Minister said earlier this morning.
What was the most important role that she played on behalf of Israel there?
I think that it was focusing on hypocrisy of places like the Human Rights Council, focusing on the hypocrisy of an organization that gives an equal voice to Iran and allows Iran to spew out its lies. I think those are really the two focus issues. And again, I think she stood up for what's right. She stood up for Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. She stood up for what's wrong about the Palestinians and continuing support and financing of terror. And so we certainly will miss her.
And she's taken a lot of heat for that, has she not?
Well, she's brave, she's strong, and I think that that's what we're going to miss.
Well, I know you don't get involved in politics because you stay at the embassy in Washington, and politics, American politics, you try to stay away from that. But what type of person would you like to see replace Nikki Haley?
Well, we're not here to give advice to the President of the administration. I'm 100% convinced that through the leadership in the White House, President Trump, Vice President Pence, certainly Secretary of State Pompeo, and National Security Advisor Bolton, they're going to make the right choice. What's right, first of all, for the United States of America, what's right for free democracies, and what's right for Israel. They usually go hand in hand.
Now, the president has a new peace plan that he's working on for the Middle East. And part of that, just the other day, he said that he's open to a two-state solution. What would you like to see happen?
What we need to see, first of all, is to have a negotiation with Palestinians, to have a partner for peace, to have someone to sit down and talk, to have someone committed to stopping violence, to having someone to improve the situation in Gaza. That's the most important thing. Once we get beyond that, we can work out what the right formula will be.
And do you think that the president's doing a good job so far? It's been 2 years now, almost 2 years since he was elected.
Well, we're very, very pleased with the administration. Two historic decisions that they took. First, on the correcting something that was too long wrong, and that was Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. No one should be able to dictate to us where the capital is, and the U.S. has stood by us. The legislation existed for a long time, but it took President Trump and this administration to take it off the paper and change the facts on the ground to move the embassy to Jerusalem. The other key important decision is to call out Iran, to make it understand that the agreement was a farce, that Iran was continuing regional activity, supporting terror, violating human rights, and I think calling Iran to task and now calling the international community to task by saying to them, we're not going to stay with Iran, and that people have to choose to make a choice, doing business with Iran, doing business with the United States of America, and hopefully improve on that very, very faulty deal.
Well, it seems that since that deal originally was negotiated by the Obama administration, Iran hasn't changed at all, have they? I mean, they're still supporting terrorism around the world, still pledged to the destruction of Israel.
Well, the previous deal did nothing to address key issues. The regional activities of Iran, the violations of the human rights, the building up the missile program, the support of terror, the financing of terror. And again, this is something that needs to be corrected, because to look at one small piece of the puzzle is to miss what Iran is about, what the fabric of this regime is about, and now is the time to call them to task.
What difference do you think Pence and Pompeo are making in this U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East and towards Israel?
I think they're taking out some of that ambiguity and making things much more clearer. When they say you have to do business with the United States or with Iran, you can't do both, that's a very, very clear message. When they're standing up and saying what's right, what's wrong, calling out states who support terror, calling out states who are violating human rights, that's a very, very, very important message that we're seeing.
And Pence has been very strong on the pay-to-slay policy of the Palestinians, speaking out against that, has he not?
Absolutely. I think the issue of financing terror, and we saw the terrible, deplorable terrorist act earlier this week in Israel with 2 Israeli citizens being killed by someone who had a job in an Israeli factory in the city of Ariel, murdered 2 people, escaped, and this man, as can expect, whether he's caught or not, that his family now have a pension for life. And that's something that we have to stop. And I think that that's calling out what's right, and I congratulate the administration. I congratulate the U.S. Congress for everything they've done on that regard.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Krasna.
Thank you very much.
God bless you.
Up next, archaeologists unearth a unique link between the Jerusalem of 2,000 years ago and today. Israeli archaeologists have uncovered a unique link between the Jerusalem of 2,000 years ago and that of Jerusalem today. It comes in the form of the oldest inscription ever found of the modern Hebrew spelling and pronunciation of Jerusalem. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
Archaeologists uncovered this pillar during an excavation near the entrance to present-day Jerusalem last winter. The column is here in the Israel Museum's Second Temple Gallery. It's the newest treasure in the exhibit from the time of Jesus. The inscription reads, Hananiah bar Dudalos mi Yerushalaim. Hananiah, the son of Dudalos, from Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, surprisingly for us, is inscribed the same way we write it today and the same way we pronounce it today, Yerushalaim. And it's the first time we have an inscription of this sort from 2,000 years ago, from the times of the Second Temple period.
Senior curator Dudi Mevorach says the name Yerushalayim exists on coins from the Great Jewish Revolt against the Romans in 70 A.D. Those coins had a political agenda, while this inscription does not.
Here, there is no agenda. It's just an artisan from a potter's village stating his name, his father's name, and stating that he is not from the village, but originally he comes from the big city, from Jerusalem.
This site was a pottery workshop that started to develop at the end of the 2nd century before Christ and continued to the 2nd century after Christ.
During the excavations, workers exposed the foundations of a Roman structure. One of the supports was the pillar the Romans had reused. It bore an Aramaic inscription in Hebrew letters typical of the time of Herod the Great.
I saw the column with the inscription. It wasn't clean, but I could recognize some letters, and I saw that it's in Hebrew.
Archaeologist Danit Levy of the Israel Antiquities Authority oversaw the excavation.
I was really excited. My heart went so fast, and I think all the people that was around me could hear it.
The site is about 4.5 miles from the old city, which would have been Jerusalem at that time.
So we now know, in a very simple manner, that Jerusalem, was called Shalem, Yerushalem, and Yerushalayim at the same time, which we didn't know before. It's just another piece of a mosaic of how we portray the past.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Yerushalayim, Jerusalem.
Still ahead, millions of Christians around the world pray for the peace of Jerusalem. An estimated 90 million Christians from around the world celebrated the annual day of prayer for the peace of Jerusalem. praying in more than 170 countries around the world. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl again brings us to the central prayer event in Israel's capital.
Thousands of Christians from around the world gathered together with Christian and Jewish leaders at the promenade overlooking the old city of Jerusalem to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, sing, dance, and worship the God of Israel.
So the Day of Prayer for the Peace of Jerusalem in Jerusalem was inaugurated in 2005.
The event is celebrated the first Sunday of October each year. It brings together Jews and Christians to follow the biblical injunction in Psalm 122:6. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. Robert Stearns from Eagle's Wings Ministry is head organizer of the event.
Jerusalem is the root of our faith. Jerusalem, in a sense, is the city of both our spiritual birth and of our future spiritual hope.
Organizers say there are many reasons to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Now, the Jewish people believe the reason he asks Jews and Christians to pray for the peace of Jerusalem is because he always wants us to take the issue of Jerusalem and keep it close to our heart.
Popular Christian artists like Eddie James and Misty Edwards led the worship. Jewish leaders thanked Christians for their support, and Knesset member Michael Oren encouraged Christians to stand up for the Jewish state.
I mentioned in my speech here that there are many international bodies who would deny the Jewish connection to this city, our common history, our common traditions, and we have to unite together.
Keynote speaker Rabbi Mark Schneier said, considering the history of Christian persecution of the Jews, it's a miracle that Jews and Christians can come together.
We're living in miraculous times, and one of those miracles is the reconciliation between our two faith communities. And I believe that we're also celebrating that miracle here today.
Not pretending that we don't have theological differences, because we do. We're divided regarding the identity of the Messiah, but we are united in believing and praying for the coming of Messiah soon and quickly in our day.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, that's a great reminder to pray without ceasing for the peace of Jerusalem. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.